When one of Hollywood's most volatile and unpredictable stars sat across from one of daytime television's most outspoken personalities, no one inside the studio expected the situation to spiral out of control so quickly. What unfolded was not a routine celebrity appearance or a tense but manageable debate. It became one of the most intense clashes ever broadcast live, a confrontation so heated that it ended with Joy Behar leaving her own show and never returning. This was not simply an interview that went wrong. It was the moment Charlie Sheen turned the spotlight back on his interviewer, dismantling her public image in front of millions and exposing contradictions she was unprepared to defend. The morning began like countless others at the View Studios in New York. The atmosphere was busy but controlled, with producers confident they had secured a high-profile guest for what they believed would be a predictable promotional segment. Charlie Sheen had been booked to discuss his latest project, and while his reputation suggested unpredictability, the team assumed the conversation would follow familiar territory. Joy Behar, known for her sharp wit and confrontational approach, was especially eager. She had spent days preparing pointed remarks about Sheen's past controversies, his public struggles, and what she viewed as his troubling behavior within the industry. What no one fully accounted for was that Charlie Sheen arrived equally prepared. He understood Joy's style, her history of polarizing commentary, and her tendency to dominate conversations by framing herself as morally superior. Rather than walking in defensively, he came ready to counter every attack. As the cameras went live, Joy opened with a polished introduction, smiling as she welcomed him and referenced his long and complicated journey through Hollywood, suggesting it had been anything but smooth. Charlie leaned back, smiled calmly, and returned the comment with an edge hidden beneath humor. He remarked that Joy's own career path in television could be described in similar terms, adding that some might even call it hypocritical. The shift in energy was immediate. The other hosts sensed it at once. Whoopi Goldberg adjusted in her seat, while the rest of the panel exchanged uneasy glances. Still, Joy pressed forward, refusing to let the moment slow her down. She challenged him directly, pointing to his very public battles with addiction and his controversial remarks about women. Charlie's expression remained steady, but his voice sharpened. He redirected the focus, bringing up Joy's own past statements about women with opposing political beliefs, comments that had drawn backlash for being dismissive and insulting. He cited specific remarks, recalling her claims that certain women were angry, incapable of independent thought, or voting against their own interests. Joy attempted to reframe the issue, insisting those remarks were political analysis rather than personal attacks. Charlie repeated her words slowly, emphasizing them, and questioned the distinction she was trying to make. He reminded her that she had spoken at length about women who disagreed with her worldview, portraying them as misguided or manipulated. The audience fell silent, sensing that this exchange had moved far beyond the show's usual arguments. Seeking support, Joy glanced toward her co-hosts, but none stepped in. Even those typically eager to jump into controversy remained quiet. When she claimed her words had been taken out of context, her confidence wavered. Charlie leaned forward, maintaining unwavering eye contact, and explained that he had watched the full segment she referenced, not just clips. He described how she had spent extended time criticizing women who held different beliefs, yet condemned him harshly when he made jokes about Hollywood culture. Joy's frustration grew more visible as she raised her voice, accusing him of degrading women and pointing again to his past behavior. Charlie responded by turning her accusations back on her, recalling moments when she had angrily confronted guests on air for disagreeing with her politically, only to later portray herself as the victim of unfair criticism. He referenced her emotional reactions following major political events and questioned whether those moments were labeled passion simply because they aligned with her views. The cameras captured every shift in Joy's expression as anger gave way to embarrassment and then to visible strain. She was no longer steering the conversation. She attempted to deny ever having a public meltdown, but her voice shook, betraying her composure. At that point, Charlie calmly reached for his phone, scrolling deliberately. For a brief second, Joy seemed uncertain, perhaps hoping he would retreat or change course, but the tension in the room only deepened as the realization set in that he was prepared to back up every word he had spoken. She tried to explain that the show and the platform itself were important, that they existed to amplify issues that truly mattered. Charlie's expression did not change. He calmly asked whose voice was actually being amplified, because from his perspective the only voice that consistently dominated the table was hers. He pointed out how rarely she allowed guests who genuinely disagreed with her to finish a thought without interruption, dismissal, or being cut off entirely. Joy wiped at her eyes, attempting to steady herself, but the moment had already slipped beyond recovery. The confident, commanding presence she carried at the start of the segment was gone, replaced by someone visibly shaken and unsure. She weakly insisted that the show featured a range of viewpoints. Charlie shook his head and told her that allowing people who agreed with her most of the time was not diversity at all. It was an echo chamber, and she had positioned herself at its center. Whoopi tried once again to intervene, suggesting a break, but Charlie refused, never taking his eyes off Joy. He said she had chosen to analyze his personal life, question his character, and dig into his past, and now it was only fair that the same scrutiny be applied to her. Joy's breathing grew heavier, and her eyes darted toward the exits. She said she could not continue. Charlie responded evenly, saying what she could not continue was an honest exchange, accountability, or being challenged the same way she challenged everyone else. His voice was not loud, but it carried a certainty that filled the room. He described her daily routine of sitting behind the desk, tearing people apart, questioning their intelligence, motives, and right to hold opposing views. When that same intensity was directed at her, he said, she collapsed under it. Joy suddenly stood, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. She declared she did not have to listen and reminded him it was her show. Charlie calmly questioned that assumption, saying she was ultimately an employee like anyone else and that the show would continue without her if necessary. He told her the network would replace her, and she would be remembered as another former host who could not withstand the pressure she regularly imposed on others. Tears streamed down her face now, her makeup smeared, the professional mask completely gone. She called him a horrible person. Charlie agreed without hesitation, saying the difference was that he never pretended to be something he was not. He did not claim moral superiority while acting like a bully, nor did he preach tolerance while rejecting opposing views. Joy backed toward the exit, but his voice followed her. He said when he made mistakes, he owned them instead of hiding behind claims of being misunderstood. She, on the other hand, had built a career around portraying herself as a victim while relentlessly targeting others. She begged him to stop, her voice breaking. He refused, reminding her of the times she had not stopped herself, whether it was attacking a young commentator, reducing a military spouse to tears, or misrepresenting a small business owner's words to fit her argument. He asked why she deserved courtesy she had never extended to anyone else. At the edge of the set, torn between leaving and having the final word, Joy insisted she helped people and informed the public. Charlie stood slowly, his presence commanding the space. He told her she did not help people at all, but divided them. He accused her of turning complex issues into simplified sound bites that supported conclusions she had already decided on, transforming political discussion into a spectacle where disagreement equaled moral failure. Joy protested weakly, but her voice lacked any strength. Charlie pulled out his phone again and said he had hours of footage showing her calling people names, questioning their patriotism, and labeling them racist, sexist, or ignorant simply for holding different priorities. He said she had made a living off division while convincing herself she was righteous. Joy shook her head violently, claiming she fought for justice and stood against wrongdoing. Charlie replied quietly, his restrained tone more devastating than shouting. He said she performed outrage for attention, turned real struggles into entertainment, and cared more about appearing compassionate than actually solving problems. Silence stretched across the studio. Joy stood frozen at the edge, sobbing quietly, while the other hosts remained motionless, afraid to speak. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of her collapse. Finally, she whispered that she quit. Whoopi broke the silence in disbelief. Joy repeated it louder, saying she could not endure being attacked and calling the exchange cruelty rather than journalism or entertainment. Charlie calmly observed that when she faced the same treatment she gave others, she labeled it cruelty, while she called it accountability when she delivered it herself. Joy backed away again, shaking her head and appealing to everyone watching. Charlie responded that he was only using her own words, actions, and history, and if that felt like an attack, it said more about her behavior than his. She declared she was done with the show, the network, and everything associated with it, accusing them of destroying people. Then she walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned studio, silent co-hosts, and Charlie sitting quietly in his chair as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. The broadcast cut away, but the confrontation had already left its mark, exposing the imbalance of power, the fragility beneath authority, and the cost of applying standards to others that one cannot endure oneself. Complicated, Charlie repeated, disbelief cutting sharply through his voice. He said it would have taken only a few minutes of basic research to uncover the correct facts, but she had chosen not to look because the inaccurate version suited her preferred storyline. He explained that this approach was not journalism at all, but political activism wrapped in the language of news. The accusation landed heavily. Joy was visibly unraveling, her hands trembling as she repeatedly glanced toward the cameras, as though hoping someone off-screen might step in and put an end to the exchange. She tried to defend herself, saying he was twisting her words and deliberately trying to damage her reputation because he could not tolerate being criticized for his own past behavior. The words sounded rehearsed, but they lacked force. Charlie leaned back, his posture relaxed and his tone suddenly calm. He told her he was not attempting to embarrass her, pointing out that she was doing that herself. All he was doing, he said, was highlighting the double standards that had followed her throughout her career. He listed them one by one, accusing her of condemning actors for being disconnected from ordinary life while enjoying an elite lifestyle of her own, of lecturing the public about values while openly ridiculing beliefs she disliked, and of claiming to support women while relentlessly attacking those who disagreed with her politically. The studio fell into a near-total silence, broken only by the faint mechanical hum of the cameras. Joy's face drained of color, shifting from flushed red to pale white, her grip on the desk tightening until her knuckles stood out. She insisted she did not attack women, but her voice had dropped to a weak murmur. Charlie responded by reaching for his phone again, calmly stating that he had evidence to the contrary. He described clips of her labeling conservative women as unintelligent, implying they were controlled by their spouses, dismissing successful businesswomen as traitors, mocking mothers who stayed at home, and portraying women with differing political views as victims of manipulation rather than independent thinkers. Joy shook her head rapidly, denying the charge and insisting she had only criticized political positions, not individuals. Charlie's voice rose now, matching the intensity she had shown earlier. He reminded her of specific remarks in which she had called prominent female leaders puppets, questioned the intelligence of women in high judicial office, and accused female entrepreneurs who supported certain economic policies of being driven by greed. He argued that these statements were clearly personal attacks, no matter how she tried to reframe them. Joy looked around the table, her expression desperate, but her co-hosts avoided her gaze. Papers were studied with sudden interest, eyes drifted elsewhere, and no one stepped in to help. The isolation was complete. She called the situation absurd, accusing Charlie of ambushing her on her own program. He responded with a short, humorless laugh and said that this was precisely how she treated guests every day. The only difference, he added, was that most people were too polite or cautious to push back the way she did. He made it clear he was not interested in playing that role. Joy abruptly declared the interview over and began to rise from her chair. Charlie told her firmly to sit back down, reminding her that she had invited him and that they should finish what she had started. He suggested that leaving now would amount to an admission that she could not endure the same treatment she routinely inflicted on others. Joy froze halfway up, torn between walking away and holding onto her pride. The cameras captured every flicker of indecision across her face. She said she did not have to sit there and listen to him, though she made no move toward the exit. Charlie agreed that she was free to leave, but warned that doing so would confirm everything he had said about her. Walking away, he explained, would show viewers that she could deliver harsh criticism but could not withstand it in return, that she projected toughness only when she controlled the conversation. Slowly, reluctantly, Joy lowered herself back into her seat. Her posture had changed entirely. She seemed smaller, diminished, no longer the commanding presence she had been moments earlier. In a quiet voice, she asked what he wanted from her. Charlie's expression softened slightly, though his words remained firm. He said he wanted honesty. He told her to acknowledge what she truly was, not a journalist or an objective authority, but an entertainer like him. The difference, he explained, was that he openly accepted his role, while she hid behind claims of integrity and professionalism while behaving like a partisan operator. Joy stared at him in silence, her eyes glassy and unfocused, as if struggling to process the weight of the moment. When she finally spoke, her voice barely carried across the table, trembling as she whispered that he did not understand. Instead of backing down, he calmly began reading from a list that was obviously prepared in advance. He cited dates and incidents with precision, his tone steady and deliberate. On November 15th, he said, she had thrown papers at a co-host during a commercial break after a disagreement over climate policy. On December 3rd, she had stormed off the set in the middle of a live broadcast when a guest corrected her on healthcare statistics. On January 22nd, she had interrupted a guest repeatedly within minutes because she disliked their position on foreign affairs. Each example landed harder than the last, and when he paused, the effect was devastating. The studio fell into a suffocating silence. Joy's mouth moved as if searching for words, but nothing came out. The other hosts stared down at their notes or fixed their gaze somewhere off camera, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. When Joy finally spoke, her words came out tangled and uncertain as she tried to dismiss the incidents as isolated moments driven by passion for important issues. Charlie leaned back, his expression unmoved, and remarked that passion was a convenient label when behavior became uncomfortable to defend. From his perspective, he said, it looked like she was comfortable delivering harsh criticism but unwilling to endure the same treatment herself. He pointed out that her career had been built on questioning people's character, intelligence, and intentions, yet the moment that scrutiny was turned toward her, she positioned herself as wronged. Joy's face reddened visibly, her hands gripping the edge of the desk as she struggled to maintain control. She insisted the exchange was inappropriate and reminded him that he was there to discuss his professional work. Charlie raised an eyebrow and calmly noted that only minutes earlier she had focused on his personal life, his failures, and his past struggles. Now that attention had shifted toward her record, she suddenly wanted to change the subject. The tension in the room became almost unbearable, thick enough to halt the show's usual rhythm entirely. Joy glanced toward the producers off camera, searching for intervention, but they appeared just as stunned. Nothing about this segment resembled the plan. Whoopi finally tried to redirect the conversation, suggesting they move on, but Charlie refused to let the moment slip away. He said this discussion mattered because Joy had spent years telling viewers what to believe, who to support, and how to see the world, presenting herself as a moral authority. He challenged the foundation of that authority, stating that her position rested almost entirely on criticism rather than accomplishment. That remark ignited Joy's anger. She straightened in her chair and shifted from defense to attack, listing her decades in television, the powerful figures she had interviewed, and the major political events she had covered. She contrasted that experience with Charlie's career, reducing it to acting roles and scandals. Charlie responded with an easy smile, saying he had entertained millions, created jobs, and never pretended to be something he was not. He emphasized that he had never claimed to be a journalist or a political expert, while she consistently spoke as if her opinions outweighed those of actual specialists. Joy snapped back, asserting her identity as a journalist and pointing to the length of her career. Charlie laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive, and explained that sitting behind a desk offering opinions was not the same as practicing journalism. He accused her of relying on other people's reporting rather than conducting original investigation, checking sources, or uncovering facts herself. As Joy's voice rose, her professional composure completely disappeared. She insisted that she researched every topic discussed on the show and read extensively about current events, politics, and social issues. Charlie responded smoothly, dismissing her definition of research and arguing that consuming partisan commentary did not transform opinion into reporting. He described her role as that of a commentator at best, and something far more manipulative at worst. The discomfort among the other hosts was unmistakable. Papers were shuffled nervously, eyes avoided contact, and even the strongest personalities at the table hesitated to enter the conflict. Joy's voice shook with rage as she declared her integrity, insisting that she told the truth and held people accountable. Charlie leaned forward again and challenged that claim, listing behaviors he described as inconsistent with integrity. He referenced selective editing that made guests appear foolish, the reluctance to invite voices that challenged her worldview, and the habit of cutting to commercial breaks when arguments grew inconvenient. Joy tried to interject, but he continued, shifting to a specific incident involving a veterans charity that had been misrepresented on the show. He pointed out that when errors were exposed, she had not corrected them but instead attacked critics and doubled down on false claims. Joy's response weakened as she described the situation as complicated, citing conflicting sources. The words sounded hollow even to her own ears, and the weight of the moment settled heavily over the set. The confrontation had stripped away the familiar structure of the show, leaving only raw exposure and a silence that spoke louder than anything said aloud.